I never thought I'd end up selling toilets on the internet. But here I am, 5 years later, running a $4.2 million e-commerce company that specializes in high-end bidets and luxury toilet accessories. I've got 16 employees, a warehouse in Ohio, and deals with 3 boutique hotel chains. And I started all this because I couldn't unclog my own damn toilet. It was late 2019. I had just turned 32, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Minneapolis with my girlfriend, freelancing as a web developer, and trying to make ends meet. I wasn't broke, but I was definitely paycheck to paycheck. No health insurance. My car had a broken tail light I couldn't afford to fix, and I was barely scraping by doing WordPress fixes for small local businesses. One night, our toilet clogged. Not unusual, right? Except I tried everything. Plunger, hot water, baking soda, a snake I borrowed from the neighbor. Nothing worked. I ended up spending $150 for an emergency plumber at 11 p.m. He was in and out in 7 minutes and said something like, "You should consider getting a bidet attachment. They're cleaner and help avoid issues like this." That offhand comment stuck with me. The next day, I Googled best bidets and fell down a rabbit hole. There was a whole market I had never considered. High-tech Japanese toilets, heated seats, self-cleaning nozzles, Bluetooth syncing. Yes, really. But what struck me was how bad all the websites were. Crappy design, outdated info, weird knockoff brands, and product photos that looked like they were taken on a Nokia phone in 2006. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my angle. I built the site in 3 days, nothing fancy, just a Shopify store with about 10 products I found on Alibaba and a few affiliate links. I called it Lavlux, a portmanteau of lavatory and luxury, which I later regretted because people thought we sold perfume. I ran $100 worth of Facebook ads and made 0 sales. Classic. I didn't give up, though. I pivoted. Started writing blog posts like top 10 bidets for small bathrooms and why your grandma needs a bidet. SEO gold. Within a month, one of my posts ranked on page 2 of Google. I kept pushing. Another $300 in ads. Still no real traction. Then came COVID. March 2020. Toilet paper shortages hit. My traffic exploded. One of my early blog posts, Alternatives to Toilet Paper, started getting thousands of views per day. People were panicking, looking for solutions. I became the solution. I flipped the switch on a drop shipping model, sourced bidet attachments directly from manufacturers in China, and started offering 3 to 5 day shipping, which I absolutely could not guarantee, but somehow mostly delivered on. I did $18,000 in sales in April 2020. It was the most money I had ever made in a month, by a lot. I cried in the shower. Not exaggerating. After years of scraping by, it felt like I had finally cracked the code. Of course, the real work started after that. Customers were angry when packages were delayed. Some bidets arrived broken. One guy sent me a picture of water spraying sideways onto his bathroom mirror with the subject line, "What the hell, man?" I had no customer service. It was just me answering emails at 3 a.m., pretending to be Jordan from support. I reinvested every penny back into the business. Bought a label printer. Hired a high school kid named Eli to help with fulfillment from my garage. Got a business license, then an LLC. I upgraded the website, got professional photos taken, and finally dropped the drop shipping model in favor of buying inventory up front. That was terrifying, dropping $20K on a pallet of bidets and renting a 1,000 square foot storage unit. 2021 was our breakout year. I started attending home improvement expos, pitching boutique hotels and interior designers. I didn't even have real wholesale pricing, but I pretended I did. I wore a suit from Kohl's and handed out fake brochures I printed at Staples the night before. Then I got lucky. One of the hotel designers I pitched was doing a project for a mid-range luxury chain trying to revamp its image. They bought 300 units of our top-selling model, the Serenity LX, for a pilot rollout. That one deal netted us $106,000 in revenue and legitimized Lavlux overnight. I took out a $200K SBA loan, rented warehouse space in Ohio, cheaper than Minneapolis, and hired a real customer service manager. We built our own private label bidet, worked with a manufacturer in South Korea, and finally had a product we owned completely. By 2022, we were doing over $1.2 million in annual revenue. I paid myself a real salary, $72,000, which felt like $1,000,000. My girlfriend, now fiancée, quit her job to join the business and runs our operations. There were plenty of screw-ups. One shipment was held in customs for 42 days because of a translation error in the product manual. Another time, we launched a new model with a smart drying feature that ended up melting plastic toilet seats when used on high. We refunded everyone and took a $40K hit. That sucked, but we kept growing. In 2023, a TikTok influencer with 1.7 million followers reviewed our product as a joke, and it went viral. 3 million views in 2 days. We made $240K in 6 days. Our site crashed twice. I thought it was the end of the world, but it turned into a huge branding moment. We leaned into the absurdity. Our new tagline became, Lavlux, the fancy but stuff you deserve. Now in 2025, we're expanding into Europe. We have our own in-house design team, run paid social across 6 platforms, and our customer retention is nearly 40%. We launched a side line of eco-friendly toilet paper made from bamboo and a Lavlux Mini for RVs and tiny homes. I still get messages from people saying we changed their lives. One woman said her 82-year-old father cried the first time he used our bidet because it helped him stay independent longer. That one made me pause. If you told me 6 years ago that my freedom, purpose, and financial independence would come from toilets, I would have laughed and gone back to debugging some dentist's janky homepage. But here we are. The weird part, I'm still not that passionate about bidets. But I am passionate about solving problems, building systems, and giving people something that actually improves their daily life. And yeah, I haven't called a plumber since 2019. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I was an overworked IT consultant with a mortgage, a kid on the way, and a dog that hated me because I was never home. My life was a circle of client calls, remote server maintenance, and microwave dinners at 11 p.m. Then a failing printer changed everything. This all started 3 years ago. I was working late for a client, helping their law firm migrate to a cloud-based document system. They had this ancient, unpredictable printer-scanner combo that would either jam or turn off mid-print. I spent 3 hours trying to scan a single 20-page lease. When it finally went through, the file saved as 20 separate JPEGs, all rotated sideways. I lost my temper and muttered, "How is this still a thing in 2022? The attorney in the room, a guy named Raj, laughed and said, "Start a company to fix it. You'll make millions." We both chuckled, but the idea stuck. I started researching during my off hours. It turns out, small businesses and law firms, especially older ones, were stuck using 15-year-old scanning software with terrible interfaces. Most of the reliable solutions were designed for big corporations and cost thousands a year. So I built something. Not a company yet, just a basic app. A desktop utility that could batch scan documents, convert them to searchable PDFs using open-source OCR, rotate and organize them, and upload to a secure cloud folder. I called it Document. At first, it was just for my consulting clients. I'd install it for them free of charge if they signed a 6-month IT support contract. I didn't think of it as a business. But over time, they started asking for it by name. A paralegal at one firm emailed me to ask if she could buy a copy for her friend's real estate office. That was the first time I ever considered charging for it. I built a website on WordPress, bought a $15 logo, and created a Stripe checkout. Price $39 one-time license. I sold 11 copies the first week, mostly from word of mouth. Then came the break. A popular small business blog picked it up in a roundup of tools to streamline your office. I woke up to 174 new sales and 300 emails. My Stripe account had $6,786 in it. My first thought wasn't celebration, it was panic. I realized the app needed serious updates. My code base was duct taped together. I'd written it in Python using Tinter for the GUI, and it looked like it belonged in a Windows XP museum. I took a week's unpaid vacation, hired a freelance UX designer, and started rewriting the backend in Electron with a React frontend. It was slow. I burned through $4,000 paying the designer and buying a code signing certificate. During this time, my day job started to suffer. I missed deadlines. Clients complained. My boss pulled me into a Zoom call one morning and said, "You seem distracted." I lied and said my wife was having a difficult pregnancy. He was sympathetic, but he also demoted me to a reduced client list. At that point, I had a decision to make. Either I shut Document down and go back to focusing 100% on my job, or I try to make it real. I quit the next day. It was one of the most terrifying decisions of my life. I had $12K in savings, a second-hand Toyota with 140K miles on it, and a mortgage I could barely afford. But I also had 800 paying users and a product people wanted. I incorporated Document LLC. I increased the price to $59 and added a yearly maintenance plan for $15 that included updates and cloud sync. A surprising number of people paid for it. I hired a part-time support rep named Ashley. She was the sister of my old college roommate, and she handled emails while I kept coding and marketing. Marketing was hard. I tried Google Ads and blew $900 in 2 weeks with nothing to show. What worked, weirdly, were YouTube tutorials. I made 3 screencast videos showing how to scan, clean, and upload documents. They were dull but practical. One of them went semi-viral in a niche lawyer subreddit. I started seeing 20 to 30 sales a day. Then someone from a mid-size firm in Chicago contacted me. They wanted 75 licenses. I didn't have any kind of bulk deployment option, so I spent 3 straight days building one. I charged them $3,000. They paid instantly. From there, it snowballed. I got better at saying no to custom feature requests. I focused on law firms, medical offices, and notaries. I added integrations with Dropbox and Clio. By the end of year 2, Document had $380,000 in revenue, with 60% margins. But it wasn't all smooth. There was a month when a bug corrupted uploaded documents. I didn't sleep for 3 days trying to fix it, and I refunded over 200 people. One small firm threatened to sue. I hired a lawyer, expensive, and added in EULA I should have had from day one. And the loneliness was real. I missed the camaraderie of my IT job. Being a solo founder meant wearing all the hats: CEO, product manager, support, QA, marketing. I burned out hard after 18 months. I considered selling, but then something unexpected happened. Ashley, my part-time support rep, said she wanted to come on full-time. She believed in the product. She also had ideas. She wanted to add mobile scanning, subscription billing, and an AI feature that could auto-categorize scanned documents. I was hesitant, but I gave her a budget in 6 months. That was the smartest decision I ever made. Document Mobile launched last year. It was buggy at first, but we fixed it. Now it brings in 30% of our monthly revenue. The AI auto-sorting? It's a killer feature. It saved one law firm 40 hours a month in paralegal time. They emailed us a thank you note and added 150 licenses. Today, Document is a team of 8. We're fully remote. We crossed $1 million in annual revenue last quarter. I finally took a salary, $85K. We're profitable, bootstrapped, and growing steadily. I still work 50 hours a week, but I choose when. I walk my daughter to preschool every morning. My dog doesn't hate me anymore. I don't think of myself as a genius entrepreneur. I just built a tool that scratched an itch, and I listened when people told me it helped them. That's it. If you're thinking about starting something, start small. Charge money early. Make it real before you make it big. And don't underestimate the business potential of a broken office printer. I started a company in my garage that hit $5 million in annual revenue, only to nearly lose it all because I trusted the wrong person. Here's how it happened and what I learned. I've always been a builder. Not in the literal sense, like construction or carpentry. I mean building ideas into real things. Apps, services, products. I was the kid selling custom-built computers to neighbors at 14, freelancing on Upwork at 17, and dropping out of college at 19 because I landed a full-time role at a startup that promised me a rocket ship ride. It was more like a Greyhound bus with a flat tire. After 2 years, the startup burned through its seed funding and collapsed under poor leadership. I'd saved about $12K and had no debt, so I decided this was my chance to try something on my own. The idea came during the lockdowns. My mom had started baking again, banana bread, sourdough, everything. But she kept complaining about how annoying it was to measure ingredients and follow inconsistent online recipes. I started researching. It turned out a lot of people felt the same way. So I built something I called Doughbot, a voice-controlled kitchen assistant app that walked you through recipes step by step, adjusting on the fly based on ingredients or dietary restrictions. It started as a basic app with about 20 recipes and text-to-speech instructions. I shared it on Reddit, Facebook groups, and one TikTok video that, somehow, got over 200,000 views. Overnight, I had 10,000 downloads. My server cost went nuts. I scrambled to stabilize the backend and added a $3.99/month premium tier that offered more recipes, smart pantry management, and integration with grocery delivery apps. Within 3 months, I was making about $7K/month, entirely solo. Eventually, I realized I needed help. That's where Lucas came in. Lucas was a friend of a friend, introduced at a small local tech meetup. He was charismatic, had worked at a few startups, and said he'd raised millions in a previous venture. He loved Doughbot and offered to help me scale, operations, growth marketing, even pitching to investors. I was 23, working 16-hour days, and honestly, tired. Having someone who actually seemed to know what they were doing felt like a gift. We agreed to a 30% equity partnership, signed the docs, and Lucas got to work. Or at least, he said he did. The next year was wild. We landed a spot in a niche food tech accelerator, brought in 2 angel investors for $300K, hired a small team, and expanded the app to include meal planning, voice recognition, and partnerships with some mid-tier food influencers. By year 2, we hit $5 million in annual recurring revenue. I had my own small office, a team of 14, and had finally stopped waking up in cold sweats. But then weird things started happening. Vendors weren't getting paid. 2 engineers quit without notice, claiming they hadn't been reimbursed for tools. Lucas kept telling me it was just accounting delays or issues with the new payroll platform. I believed him. He had access to the company account, and I assumed he was on top of things. It wasn't until our lead investor emailed me directly asking why their quarterly report hadn't arrived that I dug into the financials. Lucas had drained nearly $280,000 from the company over 6 months. He created fake invoices, bogus contractors, and expense reports for business travel that included 5-star hotels, personal trainers, even a tab at a club in Miami. He wasn't just lazy. He was stealing. I froze. I felt sick. My first instinct was to confront him, but I stopped myself. Instead, I hired a lawyer and a forensic accountant. Turns out, he'd also attempted to license Doughbots back into another company without telling me. That was the final nail. We filed for breach of fiduciary duty, theft, and attempted IP fraud. The lawsuit is still ongoing, but my lawyer is confident we'll win a judgment. Problem is, even if we win, there's no guarantee we'll see that money again. Lucas disappeared, deactivated his LinkedIn, vanished from Slack, wiped his company laptop. Rebuilding after that was brutal. My trust in people was gone. The team was demoralized, and we lost several big clients during the fallout. I had to take a personal loan to keep the servers online while we cleaned up the books. That was 13 months ago. We're now at $3.2 million ARR. Not quite where we were, but climbing again. I've rebuilt the team with people I trust. We've switched to a 2-signature financial system, and I review financials weekly with a controller and accountant. Everything is documented, backed up, verified. And I'm finally sleeping again. So here's what I learned the hard way. 1. Never give up equity without due diligence. Lucas had no paper trail to back up his claims. I didn't check. That's on me. 2. Trust is not a strategy, especially when money's involved. Even with friends or charismatic startup guys, get everything in writing, verify access levels, and monitor the books regularly. 3. Always have oversight on finances. I was so focused on building that I let someone else handle the money. You can't do that. Not even with co-founders. 4. Don't wait to act on red flags. I saw them. Late payments, weird excuses, vague reports. But I let it slide because I didn't want confrontation. That delay cost me over $250,000 and almost killed my company. 5. Have redundancy. When Lucas vanished, he took knowledge, contacts, and workflows with him. We've now created SOPs for everything. Starting something from scratch is a rush. Seeing people use something you built is addictive. But it's easy to get tunnel vision and forget that a business isn't just code or product. It's people, contracts, trust, and oversight. I still believe in Dobot. We're working on a new AI meal planner that creates recipes from what's in your fridge, even with voice prompts. We just signed a deal with a major grocery chain for integration. There's a future here. But if I ever start another company, you can be damn sure no one touches the money but me and the accountant. In 2018, I was working 60-hour weeks at a mid-tier marketing agency in Dallas, grinding out SEO reports and campaign metrics for clients who barely knew my name. I was 29, had a decent salary, and hated every Monday like it owed me money. One afternoon, after getting chewed out for missing a KPI target, because the client refused to implement 80% of our suggestions, I walked out for lunch and didn't come back. No drama. I just ghosted. I texted my girlfriend that I quit and sat in my car for 2 hours trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. That night, I wrote on a whiteboard in our one-bedroom apartment, "Make rent from something I built." I had $4,700 in savings, no job, and a brain that knew way too much about local SEO and how to manipulate Google My Business listings. So I decided to start small. I emailed every local business I had ever interacted with: barbershops, dentists, HVAC guys, and offered to audit their online presence for $50. I sent 103 emails. Got 7 responses. Closed 3. Those 3 gave me $150 and a strange rush I hadn't felt since selling Pokemon cards in 6th grade. I created a brand, Beacon Boost. Slapped together a Wux site. Had my girlfriend pose as a fake receptionist when I needed to sound more legit on calls. For the next 4 months, I cold emailed and cold called like a maniac. I offered to optimize Google listings, fix NP citations, run local ad campaigns. Anything to show ROI. By February 2019, I had 17 clients and was making just under $6K/month. Nothing fancy, but I was paying rent and eating tacos that didn't come from the freezer aisle. Then I got my first big break. A small chain of pet groomers in Austin wanted a statewide campaign. They had 12 locations and a modest budget, but they needed serious help. I underbid like an idiot just to land the deal, $2K/month for full-service digital marketing, but it gave me my first case study with measurable results. I poured myself into that account. Ran A/B tests on Facebook ads, created custom landing pages, even wrote their blog posts myself. In 6 months, they doubled their appointments and referred me to 3 other multi-location businesses. That's when things started snowballing. By the end of 2019, Beacon Boost had 41 clients, and I had hired 2 freelancers, one for copywriting and one for design. I was still doing sales, strategy, and account management. My apartment looked like a Radio Shack exploded in it. Cables, notebooks, whiteboards everywhere. I worked 14-hour days, ate like garbage, and slept maybe 5 hours a night. COVID hit, and I braced for death. March 2020, 7 clients dropped in a single week. I thought it was over. But then, something weird happened. Local businesses suddenly needed digital more than ever. Online ordering, virtual consultations, reputation management, everything I was good at became essential. I pivoted the business overnight. Created a pandemic survival package for local businesses $500 for full audit, setup of online ordering, if applicable, Google listing optimization, and 30-day ad campaign. I pitched it like it was a fire extinguisher. It worked. We signed 28 new clients in April alone. I had to stop answering phones because I couldn't handle the volume. I brought on 3 more freelancers and started building SOPs like a madman. Trello boards, Airtable trackers, Google Sheets that looked like NASA mission logs. By the end of 2020, we were at $480K in revenue. 2021 was a blur. I hired 2 full-time account managers and finally moved out of our cramped apartment into a shared co-working space. I was still in the weeds, but at least I could delegate email copy and client updates. I started focusing on niche targeting trades, small medical, wellness studios. We developed template funnels and packaged services that could be replicated quickly. Revenue hit $780K. I finally started paying myself more than $4K/month. But I was burning out. Again. And worse this time, because now I had people relying on me. So I made a hard decision. I pulled myself out of daily ops in 2022. Promoted one of my account managers to COO, handed over client communication, and focused on growth and sales only. That changed everything. In 2023, Beacon Boost crossed $1.3 million in revenue with 9 full-time employees and a roster of 113 active clients. We have built a referral system that feeds us leads weekly, automated reporting that took me months to build, and even dipped into SaaS-like territory with a GMB tracking dashboard. I still own 100% of the company. I now work about 35 hours a week, mostly on partnerships and high-level strategy. The business runs without me touching most of it. Our client churn is under 5%. And earlier this year, I got an acquisition offer from a regional marketing agency for low 7 figures. I said no for now. Because here's the kicker, I still like building this thing. I'm not rich. I still drive a 2016 Accord. But I own my time. I take Fridays off. I pick up my dog from daycare at 3 p.m. I cook dinner with my girlfriend, now fiancée, most nights. We just got back from a month in Portugal where I worked maybe 10 hours total. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone who's considering leaving their job to start something, it doesn't have to be revolutionary. You don't need to invent the next Uber. Just solve boring problems, do it better than the guy before you, and don't stop. I failed in 100 small ways, almost quit a dozen times, but I never stopped moving. You'd be amazed how far you can go just by not stopping. Title: I built a $2.4 million subscription box business after getting fired from my dream job 3 years ago. I was sitting in a beige conference room, watching my boss try not to make eye contact. It was obvious what was coming. My dream job, senior marketing analyst at a trendy CPG brand, was about to become a memory. We're restructuring, he said. Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. It felt like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. I'd spent 5 years clawing my way into that industry, networking at every conference I could afford, pitching ideas that others took credit for, and managing multi-million-dollar campaigns that had no real budget to begin with. I wasn't just laid off, I felt discarded. I spent 2 weeks in a fog. I did what everyone does: LinkedIn updates, resumes sent into the void, half-hearted interviews where I lied about how excited I was for the position. And then I got sick. Like, physically sick. My anxiety had started morphing into nausea and fatigue. I was crashing hard. Something had to change. That's when a weird idea clicked into my head. I had always loved subscription boxes. I subscribed to a few in college: snack boxes, coffee samplers, beard grooming kits. The thrill of a surprise every month made me feel like a kid again. But one thing always bugged me. Most of these boxes felt like someone just dumped samples in a box and called it a day. No story, no cohesion. Just stuff. I had an idea for a box that would be thematic, immersive. Every item would tell a story and pull you into a monthly world. Think Forest Survival Kit, 1 month. Noir Detective's Office, the next. I called it Parcel and Thread. The idea was to partner with small batch creators and indie artisans to build a mystery/lifestyle box that told a story through high-quality, curated goods. Think a candle with a scent like old libraries, a handbound journal, custom-printed playing cards styled after the 1940s, and a one-page story to tie it all together. But I had $2,000 in savings and zero e-commerce experience. I did what I knew best: marketing. I mocked up a fake box with products from Etsy and my own design work. I set up a Shopify site with a coming soon page. Then I ran a small $150 Facebook ad campaign targeting people who subscribed to similar boxes. The ad showed mock-ups, explained the concept, and asked people to join the waitlist. In 2 weeks, I had 1,200 emails. That was my signal. I launched a Kickstarter for Parcel and Thread with a goal of $15,000. I hit it in 4 days. By the end of the campaign, we raised $68,400. I fulfilled the first 900 boxes out of my garage with the help of my girlfriend, now wife, 2 close friends, and a whole lot of caffeine. I was terrified the whole time. What if people hated it? What if they demanded refunds? Instead, we got flooded with photos, unboxings, and heartfelt emails. People loved the story aspect, especially during the pandemic lockdowns when the world felt small and dull. They told us the boxes gave them a sense of escape. In year 1, we hit $312,000 in revenue. I reinvested almost every dollar. I learned about logistics, negotiated bulk rates with USPS, and started building direct relationships with vendors. I outsourced fulfillment to a local third-party logistics, 3PL, company and hired my first part-time customer service rep. In year 2, we hit $890,000. We launched a quarterly deluxe box at a higher price point with more premium items and original short fiction in each one. A small literary blog wrote about us, and suddenly we had indie authors reaching out asking to collaborate. One of our boxes even ended up in a Bookstagram influencer's post that went viral. By year 3, we passed $2.4M. But I'll be honest, it wasn't all smooth. At one point, our packaging supplier ghosted us 2 weeks before a major shipment. I scrambled and paid 3x more for custom boxes at the last minute. One artisan, who was supposed to deliver 3,000 hand-poured candles, delivered 2,000, many of which arrived broken or misshapen. I had to personally refund 450 customers that month and nearly ran out of operating cash. I started building buffer inventory and backup vendors after that. Here's the weirdest twist. Remember my old job? That company reached out about a year ago to ask if we'd be open to collaborating on a seasonal box using their new product line. I politely declined. One of the most fulfilling things about running Parcel and Thread is that I get to give other small creators a platform. One of our sew makers saw a 300% spike in their monthly sales after being featured in our box. We've highlighted over 120 small businesses across the U.S., many of them family-run or solo operations. These days, I run a lean team of 6. We've kept our values small and strange. I'm not interested in VC funding. I've been approached twice. Both times they wanted to scale fast and dilute the story-driven angle in favor of volume. I walked away. I don't work 4-hour weeks. I'm still up at 6 a.m. most days and often go to sleep thinking about wax melts or font licensing or whether a shadow box insert will cost too much extra. But I finally feel like the work I do matters. I make something weird and beautiful, and I make it for people who want a little magic in their mailbox. If you're reading this and sitting in a job you hate or stuck in the aftermath of getting let go, I'll just say this. Sometimes the door you don't want to open leads exactly where you need to go. Just be ready to pack boxes in your garage for a while. I've always been the type of person to look at a problem and think, there has to be a better way to do this. That mindset got me into a lot of trouble growing up. I would try to improve things that weren't broken, get frustrated when my ideas didn't work out, and then try again. But I never gave up. I always believed that somewhere in the mess of trial and error, there was something worth finding. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My family wasn't poor, but we certainly weren't rich either. My parents worked hard, and I remember them always pushing me to get a job as soon as I was old enough. I started doing odd jobs when I was 12, mowing lawns, washing cars, anything to make a few extra bucks. But what I really loved was finding ways to make things easier. One summer, I was working for a neighbor who ran a landscaping business. I noticed that he spent a ton of time doing manual labor when a few simple tools could save him hours. He laughed when I suggested using a machine to dig holes instead of doing it by hand. But I kept thinking about it, and eventually, I saved up enough money to buy a used auger. The next time I was hired to dig holes, I showed up with the machine, and it cut the time in half. The neighbor was impressed, and I felt like a genius. That was my first real taste of entrepreneurship. I realized that identifying a problem and finding a creative solution could not only save time but also make money. But of course, things weren't that simple. Fast forward to my early 20s. After high school, I went to college, but I never really felt like I belonged. I dropped out after 2 years, deciding to move to a bigger city and try to find my place in the world. I started working in a variety of jobs: waiter, delivery driver, even a call center rep. I wasn't happy in any of them, but I was learning. I was observing how things worked, how businesses ran, and most importantly, I started thinking about how I could apply the same problem-solving mindset to something bigger. It was during this time that I started thinking about the gig economy. I was delivering food for a few different apps, and I began to notice a recurring issue. The delivery times were often inaccurate. Customers would get upset, and I would get stuck in the middle. It was frustrating because I knew there had to be a better way to optimize these routes, to predict more accurate delivery times. But there was no solution. Not one that worked well, at least. That's when the light bulb went off. What if I could create a system that predicted delivery times more accurately? I could build a platform that used data, machine learning, and real-time traffic analysis to help delivery drivers plan their routes better. I didn't know the first thing about programming, but I had an idea, and I was determined to figure it out. So I did what any ambitious 23-year-old would do. I Googled how to learn to code and started binge-watching YouTube tutorials. For months, I spent my evenings learning how to build basic algorithms and platforms. I started small, creating simple models to predict things like traffic and weather. I also took a part-time job at a tech startup to get a feel for the industry. I learned more in those 6 months than I had in the previous 2 years of college. I was still working as a delivery driver on the side, but now, every time I got stuck in traffic or had to deal with a delayed order, I would think about how my system could fix that. Eventually, I felt confident enough to create a prototype. It was basic, nothing fancy, but it worked. I tested it on my own deliveries, and it made a noticeable difference. I was getting to my destinations faster, and the predicted delivery times were much closer to reality. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to some local delivery drivers to test the app, and I used their feedback to improve it. After a few months of tweaking, I felt like I had something worthwhile. Now came the hardest part, finding investors. I didn't know anyone in the tech world, and I had no idea where to start. But I wasn't afraid of rejection. In fact, I had faced so many no's in my life that I had developed a thick skin. I sent out hundreds of cold emails, attended networking events, and pitched my idea to anyone who would listen. It was a grind. But then, one day, I got an email back from a venture capital firm that was interested. They liked the idea, but they wanted to see more data and a clearer business model. It wasn't an offer yet, but it was the break I needed. I spent the next few months gathering data, refining my pitch, and getting a clearer understanding of how the business could make money. I learned about subscription models, SaaS pricing, and customer acquisition costs. It was overwhelming, but I was driven. Finally, I went back to the firm with a polished pitch, and they offered me seed funding to build out the platform. Building the company from the ground up was an entirely different beast. I hired a small team of engineers, designers, and marketers. We worked tirelessly to make the platform more robust and scalable. We also made sure the app was user-friendly for delivery drivers, something that was often overlooked by other platforms. In the beginning, it was just us against the world. No big-name investors, no fancy offices, just a group of passionate people trying to build something meaningful. We launched the product, and the response was incredible. Drivers loved how much time they could save with our route optimization, and customers noticed the faster delivery times. Our user base grew rapidly, and soon we were getting attention from bigger players in the industry. We secured additional funding, expanded our team, and started partnering with larger delivery services. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way, but with every challenge, I kept telling myself that the solution was out there. It was just a matter of finding it. Fast forward a few years, and we've scaled the company significantly. We've expanded internationally, and our platform is used by thousands of delivery drivers every day. We've been featured in major publications, and I've had the opportunity to speak at conferences and share my story. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far we've come, but I never forget the small-town kid who started with nothing but an idea and a willingness to work. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's a constant roller coaster of highs and lows, successes and failures. But if you can embrace the journey, learn from every setback, and stay focused on your vision, you might just find a way to create something meaningful. I'm living proof that with enough grit, perseverance, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. I remember the first time I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't some grand moment of inspiration, but more of a quiet frustration that slowly turned into a burning desire to change my life. Growing up, I was always the kid who didn't quite fit in. I didn't have the cool sneakers, I wasn't the best at sports, and I sure as hell wasn't a straight-A student. But one thing I had was a deep curiosity about how things worked and a hunger for independence. After high school, I went to college, but the whole follow-the-system vibe just didn't sit right with me. I majored in business, thinking that was the key to figuring out the whole success thing, but deep down I knew that the real learning wasn't going to come from a classroom. I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth, so I had to figure out how to make it on my own. My first attempt at entrepreneurship was a small, almost laughable, venture. I started an online store selling phone accessories. I spent weeks scouring Alibaba for cheap products, built a website using a basic template, and poured all my savings into Facebook ads. I thought I had cracked the code. But after a few months, I barely made enough to cover the cost of my ads, let alone make a profit. I had no idea how to drive traffic, no idea how to convert visitors into buyers, and no idea how to build a brand that actually resonated with customers. I had failed. Hard. But something inside me refused to give up. I was hooked on the idea of building something from the ground up, of creating a business that could truly be my own. So I pivoted. I started researching more about marketing, about customer psychology, about the ins and outs of e-commerce. I dove into the world of SEO, social media marketing, and influencer collaborations. I learned that selling wasn't about pushing products on people. It was about solving problems and building trust. Eventually, I found my next idea, a niche brand focused on sustainable and eco-friendly products. I figured if I couldn't sell phone accessories, I might as well sell something that would align with my own values and resonate with a growing demographic that was becoming more conscious about the environment. I started small, with just a few products, but this time, I was prepared. I spent months researching my target market, building an Instagram following, and crafting my brand's voice. I made sure my website looked professional, even if I couldn't afford a fancy designer. I started working with influencers who actually believed in the cause. The first few months were slow, but I didn't let that discourage me. Then one day, I woke up to find that one of the influencers I'd worked with had posted about my brand. That post went viral. Sales started rolling in. What followed was a whirlwind of new customers, more influencers reaching out to collaborate, and a growing recognition of my brand. It felt like a dream come true, but at the same time, I was terrified. I had no systems in place for handling the surge in orders, and I was still managing everything on my own. I worked 18-hour days, juggling customer service, inventory, shipping, and social media posts. I was exhausted, but there was no turning back now. The real breakthrough came when I realized I needed to scale up. I couldn't keep doing everything myself if I wanted to grow. I hired my first employee, a customer service rep who helped take some of the weight off my shoulders. I started outsourcing tasks like fulfillment and social media management to freelancers, so I could focus on the bigger picture. I also got serious about data. I tracked every penny I spent and every dollar I made. I learned to look at my business as a machine, with each part contributing to the overall success. By year 2, I was starting to see real profit. I reinvested most of it back into the business, expanding my product line and doubling down on marketing efforts. I launched a new campaign with a prominent eco-conscious celebrity, and the sales spike was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It felt like I was finally on the right track. But it wasn't just about the money. The satisfaction of knowing that people believed in my brand and supported my vision was what truly fueled me. Looking back, the journey has been anything but easy. There have been plenty of sleepless nights, plenty of failures, and plenty of moments where I questioned if I was cut out for this. But I've learned that entrepreneurship is not about never failing. It's about learning from those failures, iterating, and continuously improving. I've learned that the true value of a business is in its ability to adapt, to listen to its customers, and to be resilient in the face of adversity. Today, my business is thriving. We're a small but well-known brand in the sustainable product space, with a loyal customer base and a growing team. I've got systems in place that allow me to work smarter, not harder. I've learned to delegate, to take time for myself, and to enjoy the ride. I've learned that success isn't just about making money. It's about making an impact, creating value, and being true to yourself. But the most rewarding part of all? Helping others who are just starting out on their own entrepreneurial journeys. I've mentored a handful of young entrepreneurs who remind me of my younger self, and I always tell them the same thing. Don't be afraid to fail, but don't let failure define you. Learn from it, adjust your strategy, and keep moving forward. Being an entrepreneur isn't easy, but it's the most rewarding challenge I've ever taken on. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I say go for it. It's going to be hard. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to feel like giving up at times. But if you're passionate, persistent, and willing to put in the work, there's nothing more fulfilling than building something that's truly yours. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about taking the plunge into entrepreneurship, don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Start now, learn as you go, and embrace the journey. The road will be long and winding, but it's worth every step. I'm proof of that. I've been an entrepreneur for about 10 years now, but I still remember the days when I was just starting out, living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to make ends meet. It all began when I was working a corporate job at a finance company. I hated it. The office was soul-sucking, and the people there didn't care about anything except climbing the corporate ladder. I was stuck in a monotonous cycle, 9 to 5, weekends spent recovering from the work week, repeat. One day, I just had enough. I remember the exact moment I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. I was sitting at my desk, buried in spreadsheets, when my boss walked in with the usual condescending attitude, handed me an extra pile of work, and then told me that I wasn't performing at the level expected. The thing is, I was working harder than anyone in that office, but it didn't matter. It was a system designed to churn people out. I went home that night and sat on my bed, just thinking. I felt like I could be doing so much more with my life, but I had no idea where to start. I'd always had an interest in tech, specifically in software development. I had dabbled in it during college, but never really pursued it seriously. However, after that moment of clarity, I decided to go all in on it. I started learning to code in my free time, taking online courses and reading everything I could get my hands on. It was hard. I had no formal training, and I often felt like an imposter when I looked at other developers' work. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered my boss's face when he handed me that extra pile of work. It gave me the fuel I needed to keep going. After about a year of learning and practicing, I built my first app. It was a simple budgeting tool, but I was proud of it. The problem was, I had no idea how to market it. I launched it on a small website, but it got very little traction. I spent hours researching marketing strategies, trying everything from social media ads to influencer outreach. Nothing seemed to work. I was frustrated, but I couldn't give up. At this point, I had already quit my job to focus on my app full-time. I was living off savings and had already maxed out my credit card. It was all or nothing. One night, while doing some late-night research, I stumbled across the idea of launching a product on Product Hunt. For those who aren't familiar, Product Hunt is a platform where startups can launch new products and get exposure from early adopters. I didn't know much about it, but I thought, what do I have to lose? So, I spent the next couple of weeks tweaking my app, preparing for the launch, and writing up a compelling story of why my app could change the way people budget. The day of the launch came, and I was nervous as hell. I kept checking my email, refreshing the Product Hunt page, hoping for some sign of interest. At first, there was nothing. Hours went by, and I started to feel like a complete failure. But then, around midday, the first comment appeared. This looks interesting. My heart skipped a beat. That simple comment turned my entire day around. Over the next few hours, more comments started flooding in. People were downloading the app, leaving positive reviews, and sharing it with their networks. My app suddenly had traction. I stayed up all night answering questions and engaging with users on Product Hunt. By the end of the week, I had thousands of users, and my app was being talked about in blogs and online communities. That initial surge of interest helped me land my first big partnership. A financial blog reached out, asking if they could feature my app in one of their articles. I said yes without hesitation, and that article brought even more users to my app. The momentum started building from there. But success didn't come overnight. There were so many bumps along the way. As my app grew, I quickly realized that I didn't have the infrastructure to handle all the new users. My servers crashed multiple times, and I spent countless sleepless nights fixing bugs and scaling the back end. But I didn't back down. Every time something broke, I fixed it. Every time I faced a new challenge, I learned from it. One of the toughest moments came when I had to pivot my business model. My initial plan was to offer the app for free and make money through premium features. However, I quickly realized that wasn't sustainable. My user base was growing, but I wasn't making enough revenue to cover the cost of running the app. I was almost out of money, and I knew I had to make a change or risk losing everything. After a lot of thought, I decided to switch to a subscription-based model. It was a tough decision because I was afraid of alienating my users, but it turned out to be the right one. I spent weeks revamping the app to make sure the subscription offering was valuable and compelling. When I finally made the switch, I expected a lot of pushback. But to my surprise, users embraced it. They saw the value in the app and were willing to pay for it. Revenue started coming in, and I was able to hire a small team to help me with customer support and development. I still remember the first paycheck I paid to one of my employees. It was a small moment, but it felt like a huge milestone. It wasn't just about me anymore. I was building a business, a team, and a future. And it wasn't easy. The pressure never went away. There were always new challenges, whether it was dealing with customer complaints, managing the growing workload, or ensuring the financial stability of the company. But the rewards were also real. I was living the dream I had always wanted, and I was creating something that had value in the world. Today, my company is doing well. We've expanded beyond the budgeting app, launching a suite of personal finance tools. We're profitable, and I'm no longer worried about money or the next paycheck. But I never forget where I came from. I remember the late nights of coding and the terrifying moments when I wasn't sure how I was going to pay the bills. I'm proud of how far I've come, but I know the journey isn't over. There will always be new obstacles, new challenges, and new opportunities. For anyone who's thinking about making the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is this: don't wait for the perfect moment because it might never come. You'll never be fully ready, but you have to take the plunge anyway. There will be setbacks. There will be moments where you question everything. But if you keep pushing forward and learning from every experience, success will eventually come. It might not look like what you thought it would, but it will come. And when it does, it will be worth every sleepless night, every failure, and every setback. Just don't quit. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've always been fascinated by the idea of turning an idea into something tangible, and that led me to the journey of building my first business. This story is about how I went from a broke college dropout to launching a successful e-commerce brand that's now doing millions in sales each year. It all started back in 2017. I was 22, freshly out of college with no degree in hand and no real plan for the future. I had tried a few different things during my time in school: a failed attempt at a mobile app, a failed YouTube channel, but none of them really clicked. I wasn't doing well academically, and I was constantly feeling like I was falling behind everyone else. I remember the day I decided that I was done with school. I had been working part-time at a tech company while trying to keep up with my coursework, and the stress of juggling everything was too much. I walked into my boss's office, handed in my resignation, and left. I told myself I'd figure things out on my own. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. I moved back into my parents' house and started looking for a job, but nothing felt right. Everything I was applying to seemed like it would be a dead end. I kept telling myself that I couldn't settle for a boring 9-to-5 job. I wanted to build something I could be proud of, something that would give me the freedom to live life on my own terms. The turning point came when I stumbled across a post on Reddit about dropshipping. At first, I didn't know what that was, but after diving deep into it, I realized it was a way to start an online store without having to hold any inventory. It sounded too good to be true: sell products from suppliers and have them shipped directly to the customer. I was skeptical, but I also felt like I didn't have much to lose. I spent the next few weeks consuming everything I could about dropshipping: YouTube videos, blogs, and Reddit threads. I didn't have much money to work with, so I started small. I bought a cheap course on how to set up a store and spent hours learning about Facebook ads, branding, and website design. Looking back, I can't believe how much I learned in such a short time, but I was hungry. I had nothing else going for me, and I was willing to put in the work. I picked a niche: custom phone cases. It seemed like a low-barrier market, and I thought I could create something unique. I launched my first store, but of course, things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. My first ad campaign tanked. I spent about $200 on Facebook ads, but I didn't make a single sale. The website was clunky, the branding was off, and the products weren't exactly high quality. I had no clue how to target the right audience, and I was starting to feel like I had made a huge mistake. I could have easily quit. Most people do at this stage. But I refused to let it go. I decided to take a step back and figure out what went wrong. I started asking myself hard questions. Was my website professional enough? Were the products something people actually wanted? Was my ad targeting on point? I realized that the problem was twofold. First, my website looked amateurish, and second, the products weren't something I was passionate about. I didn't care about phone cases, so I couldn't sell them effectively. I needed to pivot. Around this time, I came across an article about the growing popularity of fitness and wellness products, and it hit me. I had always been into fitness and health, and I knew there was a huge market for quality products in that space. I did some research and landed on yoga accessories, specifically yoga mats and other related gear. The market seemed ripe for disruption, and I thought I could create a brand that felt personal and high-end, even if the products were being manufactured overseas. I immediately started redesigning my website, this time focusing on a clean, professional look. I found a supplier that could create high-quality yoga mats and other accessories, and I set up a Shopify store. I didn't just want to sell generic products. I wanted to build a brand that people would love and trust. It took me about 6 months before I felt comfortable launching again. I spent a lot of time crafting the right messaging and designing a unique logo. I started creating content on Instagram and YouTube, giving tips for home workouts and yoga practice. I ran a small influencer marketing campaign, reaching out to micro-influencers in the wellness space who could promote my products. Slowly, sales started to trickle in. It wasn't huge at first, but it was progress. I had finally found my niche. The breakthrough came when I partnered with a larger influencer who had over 1 million followers. She agreed to promote my brand in exchange for a small fee and a set of my products. That post went viral. Within hours, my website was flooded with orders. I couldn't believe it. I had finally cracked the code. From that point on, things started snowballing. I reinvested every dollar I made into ads and scaling the business. I hired a small team to help with customer service and fulfillment, and I started to outsource tasks that weren't in my wheelhouse, like content creation and product photography. I focused on the high-level strategy, building my brand, and expanding into new markets. By 2020, the brand was doing over $1 million in sales annually, and I had turned a profit. I couldn't have imagined that success a few years earlier when I was sitting in my parents' living room, staring at my failed attempts and wondering if I was ever going to make it. Today, we have a full-fledged brand with a loyal customer base and a growing product line that includes everything from yoga mats to resistance bands and foam rollers. We've expanded into global markets, and we're now a recognized name in the fitness space. It's still a lot of work, but I wake up every day excited to see what the future holds. What I've learned from this journey is simple: don't give up. There were countless moments when I felt like I was going to fail, but perseverance and the willingness to adapt were the keys to success. I still have a long way to go, but I'm proud of how far I've come. If I can go from broke and lost to running $1 million business, then anyone can do it. Just find your passion, put in the work, and never stop learning. The results will come. I hope my story inspires you to keep pushing through whatever challenges you're facing. If you want to be an entrepreneur, there's no perfect path. Just keep going, and eventually, you'll find your way. I want to share my journey with you all because I know many of you are at different stages of entrepreneurship, and maybe my story will inspire or at least offer some perspective. So here goes. It all started back in 2015, when I was working a 9-to-5 job in a marketing firm. The pay wasn't terrible, but I felt like I was stuck in a loop. I remember the day that I had an epiphany. I had just been passed over for a promotion I thought I was guaranteed, and I realized something. If I didn't take control of my future, I would spend my life climbing someone else's ladder, hoping they'd notice my hard work. That's when I started thinking about starting my own business. At the time, I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't a genius inventor or some prodigy with a groundbreaking app idea, but I knew something had to change. I started researching businesses, reading about success stories, failures, and anything I could find that would give me a glimpse of how to get started. One thing I kept coming across was that people who succeeded didn't wait for the perfect idea. They just started doing something. I decided that I would start small, nothing too ambitious, just a little side hustle. I had a knack for graphic design and had dabbled with creating logos and social media graphics in my free time, so I figured I could turn that into a business. I spent weeks building a website, creating a portfolio, and trying to figure out how to make my designs stand out. The first few months were rough. I was juggling my day job with working late into the night on client projects. I remember being exhausted but so motivated. The problem, though, was that I wasn't getting any real traction. I had maybe 1 or 2 clients here and there, but nothing that would bring in consistent income. I wasn't giving up, but I was frustrated. I had invested so much time and energy, and I wasn't seeing the results I had imagined. Around this time, I made a decision that would change the course of my business, ***, I needed to niche down. ***, the generalist approach wasn't working for me. And I was competing with designers who had far more experience and a bigger portfolio than I did. So, I took a step back and rethought everything. I started researching industries that were booming but lacked quality design services. That's when I landed on real estate. I knew that real estate agents and companies were always looking for branding materials, and they often didn't have the in-house expertise to create eye-catching designs. I figured, why not position myself as the go-to graphic designer for the real estate industry? At first, it felt like a shot in the dark. I didn't know much about real estate, but I started reading up on the industry and its trends. I learned about how real estate agents use brochures, business cards, flyers, and signs, and I realized this could be a perfect niche for me. I pivoted my entire business model to focus solely on real estate agents and companies. I rebranded my website, changed my marketing strategy, and began building my network. That's when things started to click. I began reaching out to local real estate agents, offering free consultations and creating mock-ups of designs I thought they would like. I wasn't charging at first because I knew I needed to build trust and credibility in the industry. The first few agents I worked with were happy with the designs I created, and they referred me to others. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. But it wasn't just about doing good work. It was about building relationships. I made sure to always over-deliver, meet deadlines, and communicate clearly. Fast forward to 2017, and my business had grown. I was still working part-time on it while holding my full-time job, but it was starting to bring in enough income to make me think it was time to go full-time. That was a terrifying decision. I had a stable paycheck, benefits, and job security, but I felt deep down that I was ready to take the plunge. So, I made the leap. I quit my job, went full-time with the business, and never looked back. The next few years were a whirlwind of growth, ups and downs, and constant learning. One of the biggest challenges I faced was scaling the business. As I started getting more clients, I realized I couldn't handle everything on my own. So, I hired my first employee, a graphic designer, to help with the workload. That was a huge step for me. I had to let go of some control and trust someone else with my vision. But it paid off. The more I outsourced, the more I could focus on growing the business, securing bigger clients, and expanding my offerings. Around this time, I also expanded my services. I started offering website design and social media management for real estate agents, taking the branding one step further. This diversification helped me weather the inevitable ups and downs of the business cycle. I learned that, in order to grow, I couldn't just rely on one revenue stream. I had to diversify and keep evolving. By 2020, my business was doing well. But then the pandemic hit. At first, I thought it would be the end of everything. Real estate came to a standstill, and I saw many of my clients struggling. I quickly realized that I needed to pivot again. Instead of waiting for things to return to normal, I focused on helping my clients adapt to the new reality. I started offering digital marketing services, helping real estate agents set up virtual tours, and teaching them how to market properties online in new ways. I also began offering training and workshops to help agents improve their online presence. The pandemic taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my entrepreneurial journey. Flexibility is key. You can't predict everything, but you can adapt. Now, in 2025, I look back and see how far I've come. My business has grown from a one-man operation to a small but successful agency with a team of 10. We've worked with over 500 real estate clients, and I'm proud of the relationships I've built and the work we've done. But most importantly, I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience, persistence, and the willingness to learn from failure. I won't say it's been easy. I've had my share of sleepless nights, financial worries, and moments of doubt. But I wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge has taught me something new, and I've grown because of it. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect idea or the right time. Just start. And don't be afraid to pivot when things aren't working. Be persistent, keep learning, and never stop improving. It's not going to be easy, but it'll be worth it. End of story. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years now, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't come overnight, no matter how hard you work or how good your idea seems at first. But that's also what makes it so rewarding when you finally make it. This is my story, and I hope it helps some of you out there who are just starting your own journey. It all started in my late 20s when I found myself stuck in a dead-end job at a corporate office. I had always been a big dreamer, full of ideas, but I never had the courage to jump into entrepreneurship. I was always afraid of failure, of letting my family down, of the idea that I might not be cut out for it. But that's the thing about dreams, right? They don't go away, no matter how many times you try to bury them. I remember one specific night, sitting in front of my computer after work, scrolling through Reddit, reading about people who had started their own businesses. There was this one post that really stuck with me. The user described how they started their company with a few $100, a laptop, and a crazy idea. And the thing that hit me the hardest wasn't their success. It was the idea that you don't need millions of dollars to start something great. You just need determination and the willingness to fail and get back up. I closed my laptop that night and decided to take the plunge. The idea I had was simple: online tutoring. I was a decent teacher, and I realized there was a huge demand for tutoring services that were affordable, convenient, and effective. This wasn't some groundbreaking idea, but it had potential, and I believed in it. I knew that traditional tutoring was too expensive for many people, especially for parents with multiple kids, and online platforms weren't personal enough. I could provide a more tailored service at a lower price point. I spent the next few weeks building a website. Looking back, it was painfully bad. It had all the hallmarks of a beginner, clunky design, terrible copywriting, and pages that didn't load properly. But it was live. I wasn't waiting for perfection. I was learning as I went. I also spent hours creating lesson plans, researching educational tools, and reaching out to potential tutors. I was on a budget, so I recruited my friends and family to help me spread the word. Everyone I talked to was supportive, but deep down, I could tell they didn't fully believe in what I was doing. That was hard. The first month was a total failure. I had a handful of students sign up, but no one stuck around. They came in for a trial lesson and then vanished. I was crushed. I remember staring at the dashboard, seeing 0 sales, and wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But I refused to quit. Instead of giving up, I started analyzing why people weren't coming back. I contacted the few people who did sign up and asked for feedback. It turns out the biggest issue was the interface of my website. It was too confusing. The second issue? The tutors weren't engaging enough. So, I made some changes. I rebranded. I didn't just fix the website. I made it feel personal, made it reflect who I was and what I wanted my business to stand for. I made it easier for students to schedule sessions and communicate with tutors. I also made sure the tutors I hired were passionate about what they did, not just good at it. That was a game changer. I began marketing heavily on social media, running Facebook ads, and putting together free webinars on how parents could help their children with schoolwork. Slowly, the business began to pick up. The first month after the rebranding was a huge success. We had doubled the number of clients, and for the first time, I felt like I was on the right track. But the next challenge came: scaling. At this point, I had a few tutors working with me, but I was constantly running around, trying to keep up with everything. I was managing the website, answering customer emails, handling marketing, and still trying to teach myself the ins and outs of entrepreneurship. It was exhausting. I realized quickly that I couldn't keep doing everything alone. So, I hired a marketing assistant. Then, I hired someone to manage customer service. Slowly but surely, I started handing off tasks so I could focus on growing the business. The next few years were a roller coaster. Some months were amazing, profits were higher than I'd ever dreamed. Other months, I wondered if I was going to make it. There were moments when I had to dip into my personal savings to cover payroll. There were moments when a client left a bad review, and I had to scramble to fix the damage. But every challenge was a learning experience. And, importantly, I never gave up. One of the biggest turning points came when I realized I had been focusing too much on price and not enough on value. I had positioned my business as the affordable tutoring option, but what I should have been doing was emphasizing the quality of our tutors and the results we delivered. I started offering a money-back guarantee if students didn't see progress within the first month. That's when things started to change. More students signed up because they felt like they had nothing to lose. And the ones who stayed, they got results. Our tutors were exceptional at what they did, and I made sure to spotlight their expertise in all of our marketing. As time went on, I expanded the business into new areas. We started offering specialized tutoring for standardized tests, like the SAT and ACT, and even expanded into adult education. The growth was organic, and every time we introduced a new service, it was backed by research and customer feedback. We were never in a rush to expand. We took our time, ensuring each new venture was well thought out. Eventually, the business got to a point where it wasn't just me pulling all the strings. I had a small, dedicated team working alongside me, and that's when things started to feel like a real business. By the time I hit my 5-year anniversary, I had successfully scaled my tutoring business into one of the leading online platforms in the country. It wasn't just about the profits anymore. It was about creating a space where both students and tutors could thrive. I had created jobs for others, and I had built something that was helping people improve their lives. And, yeah, I was making money, but the money felt like a byproduct of doing something I loved. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The hustle was real, and there were plenty of times when I wanted to give up, but I didn't. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. Success doesn't happen overnight, and there will be days when you want to quit. But if you keep going, if you're smart about how you learn and adapt, you'll eventually get there. And now, as I sit here writing this, I'm in a place where I can finally breathe a little easier. The business is strong, my team is incredible, and I'm living a life I never thought possible when I was working that dead-end job. So, if you're reading this and wondering whether you should take that leap, do it. The road is hard, but it's worth it. I'll start by saying that I'm just an ordinary guy. Nothing special, no big advantages, no family wealth or connections. Just a guy who really believed in one thing: perseverance. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My family wasn't poor, but we didn't have much either. I remember my dad working 2 jobs to support us. He was a mechanic during the day and a janitor at night. My mom worked as a nurse, so between the two of them, we got by. I never had the latest toys or the flashiest clothes, but I never felt like we were lacking. I think that mindset stuck with me. After high school, I decided to go to college, but not for any grand ambitions, more because it felt like the thing to do. I majored in business because it seemed practical. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but business sounded like a safe bet. I could probably get a job and move up through the ranks, I thought. But deep down, I had this nagging feeling that I wasn't meant for a desk job. After graduation, I tried the corporate grind for a few years. I worked in marketing at a small company that helped small businesses create digital ads. It was boring, to be honest. I was good at it. I could write a decent ad, find target audiences, optimize keywords. I climbed the ranks a little faster than my colleagues, but the work never sparked any joy. It was during this time that I started thinking about what I really wanted out of life. Every day, I worked on campaigns for clients, building their businesses, helping them grow. But what about me? What if I could take that same energy and apply it to something of my own? I didn't know what that something was, but I was sure of one thing. I didn't want to keep working for someone else forever. I started reading books on entrepreneurship, watching YouTube videos about people who started their own businesses from scratch. Some of the stories were about people who grew up with nothing, who had nothing, and who built empires from the ground up. It was inspiring, but also intimidating. I didn't have a unique product or an idea that was revolutionary. I didn't have any groundbreaking skills that set me apart. All I had was the willingness to work hard and learn. I remember one night, sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my computer screen, trying to figure out what I could do. I wanted to start something that could help people, something that would have a real impact, even if it was small. I didn't have much savings. In fact, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, like most 20-somethings. But I had a plan. Or, rather, I had the beginning of a plan. I decided to start a business in digital marketing, but this time, it would be my business. I wanted to offer services to small businesses that couldn't afford the big agencies, but still needed professional help. I figured if I could create affordable packages, I could carve out a niche for myself. My idea was simple: offer top-tier digital marketing services without the huge price tag. I remember the first couple of months were rough. I had no clients, no credibility, no reputation. I didn't even have a fancy website. I started by reaching out to local businesses, sending cold emails, making phone calls. Some people ignored me, some laughed me off, and some were genuinely curious but didn't bite. It was discouraging, but I kept going. One client turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, I had a handful of loyal clients. But even then, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I was working 12 to 14-hour days, juggling my full-time job and my fledgling business. I was learning as I went, making plenty of mistakes along the way. I had no idea how to properly manage taxes or deal with contracts. I had to learn everything, fast. I had to become an expert in areas I had never thought about before. The turning point came about a year into it. I landed a big client, a local restaurant chain that wanted to expand its digital presence. It was a huge deal for me. I poured everything I had into the project, working around the clock, doing whatever it took to make sure the campaign was a success. The results were incredible. The restaurant chain saw a significant increase in foot traffic and online orders. The owner was so impressed that they referred me to other business owners in the area. From that moment on, things started to snowball. I was able to quit my day job and focus on my business full-time. I hired a small team, and we started expanding our services, offering social media management, search engine optimization, SEO, content creation, everything a small business might need to grow in the digital age. But even with success, the challenges didn't stop. Scaling a business is hard. There were months when we barely made a profit, and there were months when I wondered if it was all worth it. But with every setback, I found ways to adapt. I learned how to hire the right people, delegate tasks, and most importantly, how to keep my clients happy. The key was always communication. If you're running a business, you've got to be transparent, You've got to manage expectations, and you've got to go above and beyond to keep people coming back. Now, 5 years later, I've got a business that's grown beyond my wildest expectations. We've worked with clients all over the country, and some of them have turned into long-term partnerships. I've got a team that's incredibly talented, and I've learned how to build a company culture that's supportive and positive. I'm still involved in the day-to-day operations, but I've been able to step back a bit and focus on the bigger picture. Looking back, it feels surreal. I went from sending cold emails to sitting in meetings with CEOs of major companies. But the thing I've learned through it all is that there's no magic formula for success. There's no shortcut. It's about hard work, persistence, and being willing to learn from your mistakes. Every failure has been a lesson. Every success has been a result of years of effort and growth. There's no grand finale to this story. I'm still learning, still growing, and still working every day to keep pushing my business forward. But I hope my story can inspire anyone who feels like they're stuck in the grind or wondering if they have what it takes. If I can do it, anyone can. It's all about sticking with it, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. So, if you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait. Just take the first step. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. And when you look back, you'll realize that all those sleepless nights, all those long days, all that hard work, you'll be proud of it. Remember, success is a marathon, not a sprint. Keep running, even when you want to quit. Now, I'm just a regular guy who built something from nothing, and every day I'm grateful for the journey. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it takes me next. I had no idea what I was getting into when I decided to start my own business. It all began when I was working as a sales rep at a tech startup. I was in my mid-20s, fresh out of college, and I thought I had my whole life figured out. The job was decent, great pay, flexible hours, and the people I worked with were awesome. But something inside me always felt unsettled. I was doing well, but I knew there had to be more than just climbing the corporate ladder and punching a time card every day. One evening, after a long day of sales calls and endless meetings, I found myself sitting in a local bar with a friend. She was always the adventurous type, always talking about her crazy ideas. This time, however, it was different. She was talking about a problem she'd been dealing with for months, finding quality, affordable phone accessories. We went back and forth about how it seemed like the market was flooded with overpriced, poor-quality products. I remember her saying, "Why don't we just make our own?" At that moment, a spark ignited. I was tired of talking about ideas. I wanted to do something. We spent the rest of the night brainstorming. The next few weeks were a blur of research, emails, and countless hours spent figuring out how to design, source, and manufacture the products we wanted to create. At first, I wasn't sure if we were completely crazy or if we were onto something. But we kept pushing forward, and soon enough, we had our first batch of prototypes in hand. It was one of the most exciting moments of my life, and honestly, I can still remember the excitement and the nerves running through me. But we needed more than just prototypes, we needed a market. Starting the business wasn't as easy as I thought. Sure, we had a product, but building a brand was a whole other beast. I had no idea how to market phone accessories, let alone how to create a recognizable brand. I had no connections, no big backers, and no massive budget. I did, however, have determination. We started small, really small. We launched an online store, mostly relying on social media and word of mouth. We scraped together money for ads, working late into the night to create content. I remember taking my phone to a park and filming product demos with the worst lighting, trying to make our products look good. It was awkward, but it worked. People started noticing. But things were far from smooth sailing. The first few months were rough. Our sales were trickling in, but it was nothing to write home about. The worst part? We didn't have a clue how to handle returns and customer complaints. One time, we shipped a batch of phone cases, and half of them were flawed. Our inbox was flooded with angry emails and refund requests. We had no customer service infrastructure, no system in place. The stress was unbearable, and for a brief moment, I wondered if we had bitten off more than we could chew. But there was no going back now. I learned quickly that to grow, we had to build a strong foundation. We invested in improving our supply chain and quality control, even though it meant cutting into our profits. We also had to get smarter about marketing. We reached out to influencers, micro-influencers, and even a few small-time YouTubers who could give us the exposure we needed. Slowly but surely, our brand started gaining traction. People were talking about us, sharing their experiences, and even coming up with creative ways to showcase our products on social media. That organic growth became our lifeblood. I also learned that business wasn't just about selling a product, it was about selling an experience. We started listening to our customers, taking feedback seriously, and improving where we could. Our community of buyers wasn't just customers, they were our brand ambassadors. They felt connected to what we were doing, and we made sure to acknowledge that connection. We created loyalty programs, launched new products based on customer suggestions, and worked hard to make our brand a trusted name in the market. Still, nothing ever felt guaranteed. There were times I'd stay up late, wondering if we were doing the right thing. There were days when the sales numbers were low, and I questioned whether I should go back to my corporate job. Every time I thought of quitting, I'd remember why I started in the first place. It wasn't just about making money, it was about creating something from nothing, building something I could be proud of. After about a year, things started to snowball. Our brand began picking up steam, and we started seeing real growth. We expanded our product line, bringing in new accessories like wireless chargers, portable power banks, and earphones. We also began looking at wholesale opportunities and started selling our products in small local stores. But the real turning point came when a major retailer reached out to us. They wanted to carry our products in their stores. I couldn't believe it. All the blood, sweat, and tears were paying off. The retailer deal was a game changer. It was a risk, no doubt. We were still a small operation, and the thought of scaling so quickly terrified me. But we couldn't pass up the opportunity. We took out a small business loan to cover inventory costs, upgraded our warehouse, and worked tirelessly to ensure we could meet demand. The next few months were a blur. We hired new people, implemented better systems, and learned how to manage a much larger volume of orders. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. By the end of that second year, our business had grown beyond anything I had ever imagined. We were no longer just a tiny online shop. We were a recognized brand in the phone accessory market, with our products in stores across the country. We'd achieved more than I thought possible, but it still felt like the journey was just beginning. There were always new challenges to face, new competitors to worry about, and new hurdles to overcome. But I had learned that the key to success wasn't in avoiding failure, it was in embracing it and pushing forward. I look back now and realize how far we've come. There's still so much to do, so much to learn, but I no longer have that feeling of uncertainty. I'm no longer that sales rep with a dream of something more. I'm an entrepreneur with a business that I built from the ground up. It hasn't been easy, but every sleepless night, every stressful day, every mistake I made was worth it. I may not have known exactly where the journey would take me, but I'm grateful for every step along the way. So, if you're thinking of starting your own business, take this as a sign to go for it. It won't be easy, and it'll test you in ways you never imagined. But if you stick with it, if you push through the tough times, you'll learn more about yourself and your potential than you ever thought possible. The road is long, but it's worth every step. I started my entrepreneurial journey in my 20s, fresh out of college, with no real direction and only the vague idea that I wanted to own a business. In fact, I didn't even know what kind of business I wanted to start. All I knew was that I wanted to work for myself, not for someone else. That feeling of dissatisfaction with the 9-to-5 grind had been creeping up on me for years, but the exact moment I realized it wasn't just a fleeting thought was when I sat in my cubicle at my first job, staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until I could go home. I remember thinking, this can't be my life. I had just graduated with a degree in marketing, which I figured was a good foundation for any entrepreneurial venture. But the reality hit me fast. Having a degree didn't mean you had the expertise or the resources to start a business. I knew nothing about logistics, operations, or the intricacies of running a company. But I was stubborn. I had the "I'll figure it out" mindset, and that's where everything began. It wasn't an easy start. I didn't have any wealthy family members who could fund my idea or connections that could open doors. I started small. I had $1,000 in savings, a cheap laptop, and an old car that barely ran. My first venture was an e-commerce store, selling customized t-shirts. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and people were always asking me to make shirts for them. I did some research, built a website with the little knowledge I had, and started running ads on Facebook, thinking that would be enough. I didn't consider the massive costs involved in running ads or the fact that the market was oversaturated with similar products. Looking back, it was a failure. I didn't make a single sale. My ad spend kept rising, and I just watched the money slip away. I was disheartened, but not defeated. I knew that entrepreneurship was a game of failure and learning, so I moved on to something else. Next, I tried my hand at dropshipping. The idea was appealing because there was no inventory, no shipping, and no handling of returns. I could market products online and make a commission on each sale. The key was finding a reliable supplier, and once I did, I felt like I had hit gold. I spent countless hours researching profitable niches and products, perfecting my website, and tweaking my ads. Things were looking better until they weren't. The first month was promising. I made a few sales and thought I was onto something. But, as anyone who has done dropshipping will tell you, it's a roller coaster ride. Once the honeymoon phase ended, I realized how volatile the business was. The products weren't as high quality as I expected, customers started complaining, and returns were eating away at my profits. It didn't help that Facebook and Instagram kept changing their advertising algorithms, making it harder to reach my target audience. What seemed like a set-it-and-forget-it business model turned out to be a lot more hands-on and risky than I had imagined. At this point, I was running out of ideas, and my confidence was waning. I'd spent months working 16-hour days with very little to show for it. I knew the clock was ticking, my savings were nearly gone, and the stress was overwhelming. I was just about ready to give up on entrepreneurship altogether when something unexpected happened. A friend of mine, who had been following my journey from a distance, reached out. He knew I had been struggling, and he had an idea that he thought might work. It was a business based on a service, not a product. He had been running a small digital marketing agency, but his workload was getting overwhelming. He suggested we team up and offer a comprehensive service package that included social media management, SEO, and online ad management for small businesses. At first, I was hesitant. I had no real experience in digital marketing beyond my failed e-commerce attempts. But my friend was confident, and he offered to mentor me through it. He also had a small, loyal client base that was already paying him, which gave me the security of knowing we weren't starting from scratch. So, I said yes. We started working together on weekends and after work. We used the last of my savings to get some online courses, and I spent countless hours learning about SEO, Google Ads, Facebook ads, and how to craft compelling social media campaigns. The more I learned, the more I realized just how much I had to learn. But I pushed through, and soon enough, we had a solid service offering. We decided to keep things lean. We only took on a few clients at a time, focusing on quality over quantity. Our strategy was simple: under-promise and over-deliver. We would make sure our clients were satisfied and would consistently ask for feedback, so we could tweak and improve our services. Slowly, the business started to pick up. The first year was tough, and we made a lot of mistakes. There were late nights, tough client meetings, and moments when I thought we weren't going to make it. But, as time went on, we refined our processes, and the results spoke for themselves. Clients started recommending us, and we were getting more inquiries than we could handle. By the second year, we had hired a small team, and our business was officially profitable. However, the growth wasn't as linear as I'd hoped. As our agency expanded, new challenges arose. We had to balance managing employees, hiring the right people, and maintaining a consistent service level for our clients. The pressure increased. I felt like I was juggling 10 things at once. The money was coming in, but it felt like the business was consuming my life. The burnout was real. That's when I realized something crucial. I needed to focus on the big picture and delegate the small stuff. I had been doing everything myself for so long that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. It was time to hire a manager, someone who could take care of the day-to-day operations while I focused on scaling the business. It was a tough decision, but it was one of the best moves I made. With the right team in place, the business grew exponentially. We took on larger clients, started offering new services, and within 5 years, our agency was generating 7 figures annually. The business was no longer a side hustle. It was the full-time venture I had dreamed of when I was working that miserable 9-to-5 job. It hasn't been all smooth sailing. We faced our fair share of setbacks, tough economic times, and internal challenges. But looking back, the key to my success was perseverance. Every failure led to learning, and every lesson brought me closer to where I am today. I went from almost giving up to building a thriving business that has changed my life. I'm now in a position to help other aspiring entrepreneurs, offering mentorship and guidance to those just starting out. It's a rewarding feeling, and I wouldn't trade my journey for anything. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, hard road with plenty of obstacles, but if you stick with it and keep learning, the rewards will eventually come. To anyone reading this who's thinking about giving up, my advice is simple: keep going. Failure is just a part of the process. Success is built on a foundation of persistence and adaptation. Don't quit when things get tough. Use it as fuel to keep moving forward. I never expected to be a small business owner. My life, up until then, had been a series of traditional jobs with little excitement. I worked at a desk job for a couple of years after college, doing marketing for a small company in a sleepy little town. It was a comfortable existence, but I was always yearning for something more. My real story begins when I made the decision to take a leap into the unknown, and it all started with an idea that popped into my head during one of my routine coffee breaks. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk sipping a half-hearted cup of coffee, scrolling through social media, when I saw it. A meme, just a simple picture of a small business owner proudly standing next to a product, with the caption, "The hardest thing about owning your own business is getting started." It wasn't anything revolutionary, but for some reason, that line hit me hard. I had always dreamed of doing my own thing, but never had the guts to act on it. That meme made me think, what was really stopping me? I had been pondering a side hustle for a while, but I never took it seriously. However, in that moment, I decided that I was done with the routine. I was going to quit my job and start something new. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. But there was one major problem. I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't a tech wizard or an expert in any particular field, but I had an idea, and I decided to explore it. A few weeks prior, I had visited a local farmer's market and found myself captivated by the variety of artisanal products. One stall, in particular, caught my attention, this small batch, handmade soap business. The owner, an older woman, told me the story of how she started making soap in her kitchen after a failed attempt at a corporate job. Her products smelled amazing, and I bought a couple of bars just for the experience. It was a small, simple operation, but there was something about it that stuck with me. Maybe it was the authenticity of it all. Maybe it was the idea that you could make something from scratch and share it with the world. Fast forward to that fateful morning after the meme. I found myself researching soap making, how to do it, what materials I would need, what the market looked like. I watched countless YouTube tutorials, joined online forums, and started experimenting in my own kitchen. The first few batches were, let's just say, less than ideal. The soap was either too hard, too soft, or it just didn't smell right. But each failure taught me something new, and with every batch, I got a little bit better. I remember the day I made my first batch of soap that I felt was worth selling. It had the perfect consistency, a beautiful scent, and a smooth texture. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. From there, I started to fine-tune my process, figuring out what scents were most popular, what ingredients worked best, and how to price my products competitively. The next step was designing my brand. I wanted my soap to reflect something personal and authentic, so I created a name that felt close to home, Pure Essence Soaps. The name was simple but captured the essence of what I wanted to do, create something pure, natural, and full of heart. After a few months of trial and error, I had enough product to set up a booth at the farmer's market. I still remember the nervousness I felt setting everything up that first day. I was standing behind a table filled with soaps I had made myself, with my little banner overhead. The first few hours felt like an eternity. I kept wondering if anyone would buy my soap, if they would even stop at my booth, or if it was all just a waste of time. But then, someone walked up. A woman in her mid-30s, who looked like she had been to plenty of farmers' markets before. She picked up a bar of soap, smelled it, and looked at me with a smile. "This smells amazing," she said. "How much is it?" That simple exchange was the validation I needed. She bought a couple of bars, and then another customer came, and another. By the end of the day, I had sold out of almost everything I brought. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. Over the next few months, I continued to work my day job and spend every spare moment making soap. It was exhausting, but it was also incredibly rewarding. I started an Instagram account to showcase my soaps, and word started spreading. People began reaching out for custom orders, and I was invited to other local events. Each new sale fueled my passion, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could make a real business out of this. But, of course, nothing ever goes smoothly in entrepreneurship. The hardest challenge came when I had to make the decision to leave my full-time job. I knew that if I wanted to really grow the business, I had to commit to it 100%. I remember sitting in my office, writing up my resignation letter, my heart pounding. It was the scariest thing I had ever done. But as I handed in my resignation, something inside me clicked. I was officially all in. Without the stability of a full-time job, there was no safety net anymore. I had to make my business work. I dedicated myself to building it, learning everything I could about marketing, branding, and customer service. I spent countless hours working late into the night, responding to messages, updating my website, and figuring out shipping logistics. It was a grind, but it was mine. Sales started to pick up steadily, but there were growing pains. I had to learn how to scale up production. I started renting a small space to make soap in larger batches and hired a few part-time employees to help with production and packaging. The first time I hired someone was a huge milestone. It meant I was no longer doing everything myself. But it also meant I had more responsibilities. It wasn't just about making soap anymore. It was about managing people, finances, and customer relationships. A few years into the business, things started to click. I had developed a loyal customer base, expanded to selling in local boutiques, and even opened an online store. I had finally reached the point where I could pay myself a decent salary, and it felt surreal. My business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I had grown it from a simple hobby to a full-fledged operation. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many days I doubted myself, wondering if I had made a mistake. But every challenge was an opportunity to learn, and every setback was just a step toward progress. It's still a work in progress, but I've come to realize that the journey is what makes it all worth it. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's this. You don't need to have everything figured out to get started. The important thing is to take that first step, no matter how small it seems. The hardest part is just doing it. The rest? It's just figuring it out as you go. I never imagined I'd be running my own business. Growing up in a small town, the idea of entrepreneurship seemed like something other people did. People who were born with more money, more connections, or more ambition. My parents worked long hours at local jobs, scraping by, and while they always encouraged me to aim high, they didn't exactly model the life of a self-made millionaire. So, like most of my friends, I assumed my life would follow a pretty standard path. Go to college, get a job, maybe get a house, and start a family. But life doesn't always follow the path we expect. It all started when I was in my early 20s. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing and was working as a social media manager for a small startup. It wasn't the worst job in the world, but it wasn't exactly fulfilling either. My boss was a well-meaning guy, but he had zero idea about how to run a company. The startup was barely hanging on, and so were we, the employees. Every month felt like a countdown to the inevitable. I was stuck, unsure of my next move, but I knew deep down that I wanted more. More than just surviving, more than just clocking in and out. One Friday afternoon, everything came to a head. I was sitting in the break room, scrolling through Instagram, trying to numb the frustration. I had been doing that a lot lately. But on this particular day, I stumbled across an ad for a business coaching program. It was a little pricey, but it piqued my interest. It promised to teach you how to build your own business from scratch. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the idea. The next morning, I signed up for the program. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend, because I was embarrassed. It felt silly, but there was this tiny spark inside me that kept saying, what if? What if this is my shot? The coaching program started off with the basics. It was about identifying your niche, understanding your target audience, and creating an offer that people would pay for. I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose at first. My brain was on overload, but something clicked. I started to realize that the skills I had been using in my marketing job, social media strategy, branding, content creation, were exactly what I needed to start my own business. I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. I just needed to take what I already knew and apply it in a new way. By the time I completed the coaching program, I had a rough idea of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to create another generic social media management agency. There were already a million of those out there. Instead, I decided to focus on a specific group, small businesses that were struggling to establish their online presence. It was a niche that felt like it had a lot of untapped potential. There were so many small business owners out there who had no idea how to use social media to their advantage. They were overwhelmed and frustrated by all the algorithms and trends. I could help them cut through the noise and focus on what really mattered. The next few months were a whirlwind. I started working on my website, designed my branding, and built a social media presence for my new business. I called it Social Boost. At first, I was working part-time while still holding down my job at the startup. My nights and weekends were spent cold emailing potential clients, offering free consultations, and posting content that would show my expertise. I didn't have any clients at first, but I kept pushing forward. I remember the first time I got an actual client. I had sent out dozens of cold emails, and one of them finally paid off. A local coffee shop owner called me, asking if I could help him with his Instagram page. He had no idea what he was doing, and his posts were all over the place. We had a phone call where I explained my approach, and he agreed to hire me on the spot. I was over the moon. That first client was a game changer. It gave me the confidence to keep going. Over the next few months, I started to get more clients, and I realized that I could actually make a living doing this. I left my job at the startup and went full-time with Social Boost. Things were hard at first. I had to learn everything on the fly, from managing multiple clients to handling taxes and contracts. But with each new client, I refined my process, and my business grew. By the end of my first year, I was making more money than I had ever made at the startup. I had a small team of contractors helping me with design, copywriting, and social media management. I started offering more specialized services, like paid advertising and influencer marketing, and that really helped me scale. My client roster was growing, and I was finally starting to feel like I was on top of something. But success didn't come without its challenges. As I started to grow, I had to confront my own limitations. I was terrified of failure, terrified that I wasn't qualified to lead a business. I worried that I would burn out or that the whole thing would come crashing down. There were months when I felt like I was in over my head, and I questioned whether I'd made a huge mistake. I had to learn how to manage not just the business, but my own mental health. That meant taking time off when I needed it, asking for help, and learning to delegate. There were so many times when I felt like I was going to give up, but then I'd look at the progress I'd made and think, I can't quit now. Looking back, it's surreal to think about where I started. I was just a 20-something kid with a marketing degree and a lot of uncertainty. But somehow, I made it work. And the best part? I didn't have to wait for the perfect moment or for some big opportunity to fall in my lap. I just started. That's the key. You don't have to have everything figured out from day one. You just need to take that first step. Now, I run a 6-figure business, and I'm in the process of scaling even further. But the money isn't the thing that excites me anymore. It's the fact that I built something from nothing. I helped real people grow their businesses. And most importantly, I've learned to trust myself and my abilities. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a job you hate, or you're unsure about starting your own business, my advice to you is simple. Just start. You don't need to know everything, and you don't need to be perfect. You just need to take that first step, even if it's small. Trust me, it's worth it. This journey has taught me so much about resilience, about believing in myself, and about the power of persistence. I still have a long way to go, but I wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes, all it takes is that one moment of doubt to spark something big. I'm living proof of that. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.